Vordeer 92 here. American CEOs make 273 times more than the average worker. I'm going to recommend that. Anyways, this is by Moores and Company. Saturday, July 6, 2013. Look at that picture. You got the two pig noses scuffling up all the coins and change and money. Okay, if you're the CEO of a major company today, you make an average about 273 times more than the average worker. That's according to a recent analysis by the Economic Policy Institute, EPI, of the CEOs to worker pay ratio at top 350 firms. The average pay EPI found was $14.1 million in 2012, up 12.7% from 2011. That's a big change from a half a century ago. In 1965, the CEO to worker ratio was about 20 to 1, but it grew over the next 3 decades, and that growth picked up speed in the 90s. It peaked in 2000. Before the early 2000 recessions, with a CEO to worker pay ratio of 383.4 to 1, it hit a lesser peak again in 2012 before the Great Recession with a ratio of 351.3 to 2:1. During the recovery, CEO pay has been climbing upward once more. At the same time, for most Americans, wages have remained stagnant at best. A separate analysis of a smaller group of CEOs, the top 200 chief executives at public companies with at least $1 billion in revenue, found a median pay package of $15.1 million, up 16% from 2011. The study, conducted by Equilar Inc., an executive compensation analysis firm for the New York Times, found that the 200 CEOs in question also received boatloads of stock and options awards equal to an additional 60% of their pay. Gretchen Morgenson writes, "So much of the idea that shareholders were finally getting through to corporate boards on the topic of re-inning pay. At least the stock market returns generated by these companies last year exceeded the pay increase awarded to their chiefs. Still at 19% in 2012, the median return was only 3 percentage points higher than the pay raise. In other words, it's still good to be king." When Dodd-Frank was being formulated to rein in the excesses of the years before the 2012 crash, Senator Robert Menendez, Democrat, New Jersey, added a provision to the bill requiring that companies disclose their CEO to work pay ratio in every SEC filing. The hope was that making this information public would encourage shareholders to keep executive pay in check. But nearly 3 years after Dodd-Frank was signed into law, the Securities and Exchange Commission has yet to implement rules for pay ratio closure. Companies have long complained that it would be costly to accurately report their median workers' pay and have lobbied rigorously against it. Rep. Bill Huizenga, Republican, Michigan, that's where I'm from, Michigan, that's where I live, introduced a bill in March, the Burdensome Data Collection Relief Act, striping the provision from the law which corporate complaints are justification. This House Committee of Financial Service advanced Huizenga's bill to the House floor last month. Regardless of whether the data is ever collected, stockholders may not care anyway. As the National Bureau for Economic Research noted in 2005, when executive compensation was climbing toward its most recent pre-financial crisis peak, shareholders don't complain about CEO pay when the stock market is doing well. During a period of market booms, the demand for executive goes up and firms need to pay more in order to retain the higher executives, the report authors wrote, citing early research. Later in the same report, they write, a rising stock market, which affects even the market's caps of poorly performing companies, provides most firms with a convenient justification for substantial pay increases. Furthermore, investors and outsiders are generally less bothered by excessive distorted pay arrangements when markets are rising rapidly. The Atlantic's Derek Thompson paraphrases, bull markets make shareholders less likely to kick and shout when executives pull down one-year pay packages, many hundreds of more than their average workers. In other words, bull markets make CEOs fabulously wealthy and they make shareholders indifferent to their fabulous wealth. So as corporate profit grows, so will CEO salaries. Even as for most Americans, wages stagnate or fall. The recovery continues to some, but not most Americans. So this is something that I've been talking about, is how your average American worker only makes $7.25 an hour to $7.40 an hour. That's minimum wage. Meanwhile, your CEO is making 273 times what you're making. You know, your median worker, the one who's making more than minimum wage but is not making more than a CEO, is only making about $16 an hour. $16 or $16.25 an hour. That's your median worker. Okay, that's like your supervisor, maybe a manager. That's about where that's at. At the end of the day, most Americans are J-O-B, just over broke. Many of us are working 40 hours a week and still can't make ends meet. And then when we complain about it, what are we told? Get off our lazy asses. Pull yourself up from your bootstraps. It's your fault that you don't have money. You're lazy. You're slum. That's what we're told. Yet, look at these CEOs who virtually do jack shit, make millions and billions of dollars off of the hard work of other people, but we're the lazy ones. Right. See, what's going on in Egypt and what's going on in Syria is what needs to happen in the USA. Now, I'm not saying go kill people. I'm not saying let's be violent and irrational. But it's time for people to wake the hell up and start fighting for their rights. Start fighting for their equality. Start fighting for a better way of life. Because a lot of us live miserable, shitty lives. Okay? And a lot of us want to turn a blind eye to the suffering that goes on in our communities, our cities, our families, our homes, our lives. People can't afford to buy their children clothes and food and keep a roof over their head. And when people, complain about how low the wages are, it's always, well, go to college, learn a trade, get a skill, get a degree, you'll make more money. That's a complete bullshit. Because you got people who have degrees, and guess what? They're still making $7.40 an hour at your local McDonald's. Most of these jobs are service economy jobs with low wages, okay? Used to be first of all, minimum wage was never meant for grown men and women to be living on, and definitely never was meant for grown men and women to be trying to raise families on. Okay? Minimum wage itself really is for young teenagers who are still in high school and still depending on their parents, for young college students who are still living with their parents. It wasn't meant for grown men and women who have bills to pay and children to take care of. It wasn't meant for that. However, we done turned minimum wage into a way of life. And don't nobody ever petition these stupid ass politicians that we continue to elect and support who don't do jack shit for us but sit up and feed us lies. Okay? Or in some cases, they only care about a couple of groups. Damn all the rest of the groups that need help. Obama. Anyways, it's just ridiculous. Now, do I think Obama's plan of raising the minimum wage is going to help? No, it's not going to help at all, because at the end of the day, it's not so much the wage that's causing the pay discrepancies and poverty and poor. It's the fact that we have a very high inflation rate, as in you could be getting paid $9-10 an hour, but guess what? Watch gas be $5 a gallon, $6 a gallon. Watch food continue to rise. It's already up 30% from last year or previous years. It's the inflation that's causing people to be broke and living in poverty and suffering. Because if gas was 99 cents a gallon and you was making $7 or more an hour, you would be okay. If you didn't have to pay such high prices for food and such high prices for a house, clothing, TV, internet, phone, whatever, it's the inflation that's causing the problem. It isn't so much that it's the low wage, it's the inflation. So my point is, even with $9 an hour, it's still going to be high inflation and people are still going to be struggling to make ends meet. Once again, wake the hell up, people. Realize the injustice. It's time to fight for your rights. It's time to fight for equality. It's time to demand equality. Vordir out of here.